Good afternoon. Good afternoon. How's everyone doing? Sound quality okay? There we go. Is that better? I'm going to unmask to be up here. I just want to thank everybody for coming this afternoon. We have a really wonderful speaker getting ready for you all this afternoon, and just speaking with one of the students just now. It sounds like just a really wonderful experience for a lot of these folks that have attended this school. But let me just start and give you just a little bit of background about Jonathan Starr. After graduating from Emory University in the late 90s, he worked his way through the hedge fund and investment world to found Flag Street Capital. But when he saw a nation starving for educational opportunity, he chose to do what I hope many of my future educators opt to do, to make a difference. Jonathan Starr did not go small. He opened the Abaarso School of Science and Technology in an underserved Somaliland, and since has changed lives in such a profound way. And just speaking with Saeed just a couple of minutes ago, it sounded like a wonderful experience for him after having come to America one time, but then to come back to Westminster, then from there is just a really great testimony that shows the global impact Jonathan's school is having and will continue to have. In 2017, Jonathan published It Takes a School, the extraordinary story of an American school in the world's #1 failed state. It chronicles his story of leaving the financial world to found the Abaarso School of Science and Technology. I'm sure it was a little bit of a pay cut as well. He did it with his own finances. Today, he's going to tackle the tough task of challenging our relationship with technology. It's so interwoven in our DNA, and you all know that I'm a little attached to it myself. So it will be very interesting to hear how he's going to do that. And I want to add just a little bit, our two students who are current students right now, we have with us that if you, Muhammad Ismail said before attending Abaarso school, I had never thought about how I could impact my country. My entire world was in a small bubble. Thanks to Jonathan and his brilliant vision and effort to open Abaarso, I was able to attend this great institution, Westminster College, and after graduation, I plan to go back and give back to my country. And that says a tremendous amount of the impact that Jonathan is having. But let me allow Jonathan to tell you his story. Let it inspire you to never settle or miss an opportunity to change people's lives, to make a lasting impact. We're lucky he didn't. Ladies and gentlemen, Jonathan Starr.
Thank you. That was very kind. Thank you. It's also very bright. One nice thing in this I've noticed in the world is that if you succeed at something, people will listen to you, even if it's on a topic that you didn't necessarily succeed in. And we're going to see that today. So I am going to give you thoughts on, I've dove deep into education and very hands-on. And I've looked at technology and its impact, and I've thought deeply about it. And from that, I have views. But to be fair, all of this are views about the future and even what should be happening today. None of this has all been tested. So part of what I hope a college experience is critical thinking and trying to think through complex issues. And I'll get into that. So for you to, the point here is to say that I'm not going to be right about everything that that is going to be up here, but I hope I can engage your mind on it. So let's, I thought I'd done that right. There we go. So, and if you saw the title of the thing, Education in Time with Alexa. Alexa can tell us the derivative. If Alexa can tell us the derivative and knows calculus, what does that say? There is a narrow view, and I don't know how many of you have thought about this, but like, does this mean that people are going to cheat? And I mean, there are websites out there that you can put the equation in and it will show you every step of the way. So you can even prove your work while not having done any of it. And there can be a view in society, just like, this is bad. This is a bad development. Now people aren't going to properly learn. You know, A better view, I'd say, would be to say, if technology can calculate a derivative, what else can it do for our education? Can it help us learn to do things? My actual view, and a deeper view, is to look system-wide and say, if Alexa can do that, if technology can do that, and it's just like that, do I need to? Like, are the goals of our education system a little outdated, perhaps? You look at something, how many of you, show of hands, saw Hidden Figures, the movie Hidden Figures? Like, good movie. One of the things I found most fascinating about it was they say, bring in the calculator. They keep saying, bring in the calculator. And I think of bringing the calculator, as you guys do, it's a physical thing you hold, or it's even like something you do with your phone. But of course, they meant a human because they didn't have calculators. So back then, a role of education was to become so good that you could calculate very complex problems. Well, maybe that's not necessary anymore in the same way. So we need to rethink education. And what does this mean? The implication, we have to shift learning from commoditized skills that computers and technology can do. If we just know how to do what computers can do without us, is there a role for you? I mean, if you're just an amazing calculator at this point in time, once that got you a job at NASA. Right now, that probably doesn't get you far at all, unless it comes with a lot of other skills. So we're going to have to determine the goals. I think people want to take technology in education and say, how does it help us? How do we push education forward? I'm saying before you ask that question, you say technology, it's changing the purpose of education. So before we ask the question that says, how should we use it? We should say, what should we be learning? Because learning how to be a calculator isn't necessarily the answer anymore. So technology can do things, and it will be able to do more and more things. Do we want to just learn to do it in an inferior way to them? Because I'm sure the absolute best human calculator back in the day is nothing compared to what a calculator can actually do. And of course, if you're relying on one or the other, you know which one you would rely on. So only then can we say, how can technology help us get there? We can get a roadmap and say, what are the tools it provides? But first, before that, let's actually think about what we should be learning, what we should be doing. So I want to step back and say that, like, why are we being educated in the first place? Now, if you go back in time a little and you say, wait, well, why was calculus the goal? AP, like, why were those the goal? It's because we were trying to beat the Soviets in the Cold War. That's why they were the goal. Well, that's not necessarily exactly the goal anymore. So what are the goals of education? And I argue it's to prepare you for your life, not only in the future, but even today, to make you ready for it. And what does your life mean? Does it mean get a job? Yeah, but it means much more than professional. It's professional, it's personal, it's your ability to have your social ability and community ability. It's all of those things school is supposed to be preparing you for. Education is supposed to be preparing you for. So let's start with the professional. Again, show of hands. How many of you heard some version of, we have no idea what the jobs of the future will be, right? 70% of the jobs in 10 years are going to be jobs we haven't even thought of, right? We've all heard these things. So that's a little intimidating. It's kind of like, well, if we don't know what the jobs of the future are, how are we supposed to prepare professionally? Well, I'm going to argue that actually it's pretty simple. That actually it's actually pretty obvious, and what you need to do to prepare is actually pretty obvious. If we look at technology from 10,000 feet, I actually think the computerization of things is pretty predictable. Now, in every individual piece of society, that doesn't make it predictable. But on the whole, what does it do? It gains ground where tech has advantages over us as humans. And that isn't everywhere. So where does it have advantages? There's common themes: massive amounts of data and predictable variables that can easily be categorized. That sounds, I think, a little high level. So let's jump into an example of this. So travel agents and technology and travel agents. I want you to picture, so it dominates because sorting through flight options, because available seats flying to different places is constantly changing, and it's a large pool of data. I want you to think about what the travel agent needed to do before technology was there. And I don't just mean before Expedia and Orbitz and those things. I mean before you actually could pull up a screen, or anyone could, and see even flight options. So you know that you're in Boston and you need to get to LA. So you call a travel agent and like, well, let me call Delta and see what they have through Atlanta. Let me call these places. And of course, even the price they had as they go through this, they change. So this is a really difficult task for a human to do. For technology, it's just a few variables, right? You only have to look at a few things. It's just that we're not very good at gathering large amounts of data. Computers are very good at that. Technology is very good at that. So the computer took over the travel agent. Kind of, not fully. What the computer did is it got it down to the final judgment. Would you go on Expedia, because you know you have to go from St. Louis to Los Angeles? Would you go on Expedia and just say, book me a ticket from St. Louis to Los Angeles? Show of hands, how many of you would do that? Just book me a ticket. No, what you do is you go on, and it's very good at saying, let's see, should we look at St. Louis to Los Angeles via Anchorage? Yeah, sure. Okay, it doesn't work. It's too long. It's too expensive. No one would want to do that. Okay, I'll put that at the bottom of the list. Okay, well, there's some directs. Those are nice. Let's show those. Then there's some going, it knows that the 24-hour routes are probably not something you're interested in. It sorts the data for you, but you have to make the complex decision. And this is like, is this a complex decision? It is for a computer. I mean, a computer can know $400 is better than $700 for the same flight. That's easy. But what if it's 2 hours shorter? You know, that's actually, if you think about it, a really complex issue. Not that it's so complex like we can't discuss it, but every person in this room has a different answer to this question. And even within each person, your answer is going to be different at different times. So which is better is actually incredibly complicated to estimate. It's not that easy to think through this problem. Humans, what we're good at is taking complex issues and figuring out what matters. What is the most critical piece of information that I need to understand? So we're slow. Yeah, we're slow. Like, we're not going to be able to, even if we had a whole list of all the flights, for us to sort through them all and look at all the possibilities. Well, let me add the one through Chicago to this one. It's going to take us a really long time. But where we're good, very good, is to say, okay, well, let's look at the situation. I am really low on money right now. I can't afford the 300. And you know what? It doesn't make any difference if I get there 2 hours later anyway. Maybe that's the position I am in life. Or maybe my mom is sick and I'd say, I don't care. Like, just get me there. I need to get there as soon as possible. You know the answer to this, or at least you're good at sorting these things out. Computers have no idea. They don't even know where to start. If you just think of how a computer would be, what they do is they check every option. So they're saying, well, which flight should I take? Well, I have to look at all these details of my life. Did I brush my teeth today? They're going through everything. We know that whether or not we brushed our teeth today has no impact on which flight we should be choosing. Computers can't just make that assessment because I guess conceivably in some world, maybe it could impact things if I have a terrible toothache problem and I need to get to the dentist. These are complex issues that we know about our lives, and you can't, the idea of technology doing this for us is virtually unthinkable. So yeah, how important is this? It's all these questions, right? In one case, I'm saying finances, but maybe you have a fiance who's going to be dumping you if you don't get there in time for this thing. Maybe that's important. We have other edges in the professional world as well. So let me go through this. So social skills and human connections. We still can motivate a person. We can empathize with a person. We can hopefully be easier to discuss things with than a computer probably is going to be for a long time. I mean, when you're excited about something, you don't tell your computer. You might tell your dog, but even that is not as satisfying as being able to tell your friend or being able to tell your family. It's very hard to see technology being able to interact with humans in a way and interact with people. And that is ultimately our goal, is to make people's lives better. It's very hard to see technology doing that in a way that can compare to what a well-trained human can do socially with another human. So what do I mean by multifaceted physical tasks? And this is an area I want to be clear that I think long-term, a computer can technology can probably outperform us, but it's got a long way. So if what we have to do is move these boxes from here up, it's pretty easy to create a tech. I mean, I can't do it, but there are people out there who can make a robot that just constantly does it. It can lift more than we can lift. It can do it all day long. It doesn't get back pain. It doesn't sue you, and it doesn't charge you any money after you buy it originally. I mean, it's just a good deal to have a computer do that. But if you're saying, okay, I need to move out of my home and move to this other place, having a somehow robot that knows how to navigate your home, that knows how to do, can go upstairs, that's not going to be anytime soon. I'm not saying that means you should all go into the moving business. I'm just saying there are areas where technology, even physically, is a long way away from competing against us. There are complex physical things to do. I have not yet seen soldiers be replaced by computers purely, right? I mean, you can say certainly tanks are computers. It's true. We still seem to have ground soldiers because it's just too hard for a computer to do all these things, for technology to do all of it. Physically too hard. So we do have other areas in the professional world. So where do I come to out of this? And let me again remind you why we're even talking about this. I'm talking about this because if we don't know if we have no vision for what technology is taking over in the world and what place we as people have, then I think it's really hard to say, well, this is what we should be using in our education system. This is what we should be doing. We're trying to figure out the goals of our education system. So what won't survive? I think professions requiring limited judgment. If there's very little judgment, there's just not a lot of room for paying somebody much to do it. And you probably prefer replacing with technology with time. Jobs that will require, the jobs of the future will require dynamic judgment. When I say dynamic judgment, dynamic in that the same answer today doesn't necessarily hold tomorrow. The next phone that Apple creates doesn't necessarily have even the same goals as the phone it should create after that. The world changes. Even within the next phone Apple's creating, whatever they're working on right now, based on what Samsung and what Google comes out with Android, with everything, they may have to change it completely just immediately based on what comes out. I mean, think of the smartphone world. This is a little before your time in some of this, but before the smartphone, there was not a smartphone. And then one day, Steve Jobs came out with the smartphone and everyone thought, oh my God, scrap everything else we were doing. We need to make a smartphone. You need to be dynamic in your thinking. If you're dynamic in your thinking, you have a place in the world. Another thing is communications and social skills. And I'm proud of this example. You go to McDonald's and you see screens now sometimes where you can order. I've been to some restaurants where you can actually just put in your order. And I've thought to myself, well, that's better. Why do I want to deal with the rest of it? Why don't I just put my order in? And yeah, for a while, it'll be a human who brings it to me, but at some point that'll even go away. And you can just go and have this nice meal. It doesn't let you leave without paying. It all works. But then you think about, I think about my uncle who goes to the same diner every single day. And who does he meet there? All of his friends who he meets at the diner every single day. And it's not because the diner's food is so good. It's just they like the company. You know, the person who is at the counter, the cook, is not some wonderful cook, but what they are is somebody who they can just talk to. And it's a whole social life. And I don't see technology replacing that. The ability to engage with other humans, I just don't see that going away as a valuable skill anytime soon. And the jobs of the future will require creativity and independent thought. You cannot, everything that technology has done, it's done because somebody thought, oh, that's something technology can do, and came up with something. And a bunch of people problem solved and figured it out. Technology doesn't do it on its own. It can't make this without our having thought of something different, or have thought of something new. And I feel like when you do these things, you talk about these grandiose things like the smartphone. This is true about everyday life also. You may have just a better way for you personally to manage the details of your life, that your mom wants to talk to you this often and you want to make sure you have time for your friends, and you may just come up with actually a creative way to deal with something like that. That's valuable. I said in the beginning that we have our professional, what's the purpose of school? It's to prepare us professionally. It's also to prepare us personally, social life, those things as well. Those are all the same here. It's the same skills. What do we need? Complex analysis. Really, some of this stuff is, I gave the example of a flight decision. That's basic stuff compared to what you really can be dealing with. How do I raise my kids? How tight do you hold on to them? How much do you balance the fear of their safety if they're alone, if they're kind of out in the neighborhood alone, versus the fear that your kid's going to grow up unable to actually handle that in the future? These are tough questions. I can tell you, I have 2 kids. These are tough questions, and it's not always agreed upon between people. And the situation, again, is what? It's dynamic. The answer today can be different than the answer if your neighborhood starts to deteriorate and it gets dangerous. The answer is different if somebody just now is driving too fast on your street constantly and you can't do anything about it. And the answer is different if you feel like your kid is struggling to be independent, in which case maybe you need to give them a little space out there to be independent. But these are complex questions. And in your personal life, if you're not used to actually doing reasonable analysis, you're not going to necessarily come to the right answer. Communication and social skills. I have examples there. You can see it's clearly how we actually relate to other people can make a huge difference. The work I've ever done in the past, how I related to people made a huge difference. And I'm not saying everyone liked it. I could have got better at it, but certainly how we relate to other humans can make a huge difference. And then creativity and independent thought. These are in your personal life also, as we've discussed. And actually, it's worth saying, as part of that, and it's kind of merges a bunch of these, the questions of things like, do I do something different from what's done before? Kind of combines them all. It's creativity in what you've come up with, but it also has to do with the complex analytical problem of, can I go against tradition? Can I do that? So what do we need to focus on for skills in education? We need to rethink all of it for every single aspect of any curriculum. And I'm not just talking about higher ed. I'm talking about the full way. We should be asking the questions. Does it develop complex judgment? Does it develop our communication, our social skills? Does it develop our independent thinking and our ability to think creatively? Does it do these things? If it doesn't, we're going to have to really ask why it's there. And there could be very good reasons in some cases, but we should not say the starting position should be a blank sheet of paper. The starting position should not be what we used to do, because what we do now is based purely on what we did before. It's changed extremely little over the years. So just as an example, what does this mean for reading and writing? So there's an example that's been in my mind for some time now, which is 2 students. And I want you to picture, because I'm sure you went to school with these kind of kids. So you have 2 students in high school, and one of them is fantastic as a written communicator, great writing. He or she will not speak in public. They will not, like, they're very shy, but terrific written, terrific. Like, this person can end up anywhere, right? College-wise, they can end up in any school, right? Because they get A's on everything. One class required them to do a presentation. They don't really do it. They kind of shy away during the presentation the whole time, but the teacher feels bad and says, well, he's shy. I don't really want to punish him for being shy. So that the other kid, terrible written communication, so terrible in his papers, but is so social. This is a kid who can talk to anybody, can discuss things with anybody, just isn't very good in terms of the written side. That person is practically a dropout. Those are very strange incentives. It's not about punishing kids. It's about incentives and what we're saying is important in education. In the real world, which isn't just the future, but I mean even your world that you have friends, you have family, you have people out there. If anything, your written communication is less important than your oral communication. Your ability to talk to people, you don't just write your friends notes, hopefully. Hopefully you actually have conversations, you have discussions. In a school system, an education system that puts virtually no value on that and they have, in my mind, they have failed that kid who they gave A's to all the time. That's who they really failed, because that kid got through all of school without being able to talk to somebody. And that's not okay. That is a skill he or she needs in life. At the same time, you think like comprehension. Comprehension is super important, for sure. But comprehension in a school setting almost always means reading comprehension. I'm not against reading comprehension, but if one of you was to say, how do I make that recipe right now? How do I fix this little plumbing thing in my house? Or how do I build this thing? Yeah, or how do I play this game, whatever? Yeah, some of you would say, okay, let me read the directions. And others would say, I'm going to go on YouTube. Why is that a less important skill? I understand it was less important before YouTube existed, but YouTube has existed for some time now. And why isn't your video comprehension just as important as your reading comprehension? Why isn't that a skill, to be able to watch something and be able to learn from it? I mean, you can read books. Books have always been important in school. Watching the movie about it or the documentary on it hasn't been. Why? To me, that just doesn't make any sense for how society, for what we're actually supposed to be learning to do and the skills we should be learning. Oh. Yes, here we go. So how about a study? So that was reading, that was comprehension, communication. What about study of complex moral issues? So ideological purity versus pragmatism, a favorite of mine. So I've heard many people, I've actually had faculty at our schools quit because they say, I disagreed with something. I disagreed with that disciplinary decision. And therefore, I am not going to be in a place where I'm supporting this ideology, this place that is not exactly how I think it should be. And I think, okay, so in the name of your goodness, you're breaking a contract and leaving a bunch of underprivileged kids who you agreed to go and teach for this year and who are now going to have to be without a teacher. And that's in the name of some sort of purity. The reality is that if you want to be ideologically pure, you can be, but you can't exist with other human beings in society. No two of us are exactly the same. Now, does that mean that you need to go along with the Nazi party when that's what's happening? No. That's why it's a complex issue. There is no correct answer in these questions. It depends on the situation, and you need to be able to analyze the situation. And people analyzing the battle between ideological purity and pragmatism, to me, seems like a pretty worthwhile thing. Just another like a historical example that came up in a discussion last night. The Soviet Union, one of the worst, most horrific regimes in history, massacred its own people. And yet the US and other places partnered with it. Why? Because we were fighting against two regimes that we thought were even worse, or at least as bad. It certainly wasn't being ideologically pure. Was it a good decision? It's an interesting study to look at. Liberty versus equality. These things don't perfectly match, but we call them both values. Should students be looking at things like this, discussing them? How do these conflict with each other? Loyalty versus honesty. Do you turn in your sister when you know that she did something wrong? Loyalty, do you tell your friend? Do you tell your friend that, no, you should not wear that? That does not look good. Do you do that? I mean, are you loyal? Are you honest? What is it you're supposed to do? These are complex questions. And again, the right answer is really about an individual situation. You need to look at it enough and have thought of it enough that when you face these things in life, you have some preparation to deal with them. Change versus tradition, which I mentioned before. Do I just do things like the old people used to do? There are arguments for it. At the same time, if everyone did that, we would not be talking in an auditorium where I can use a microphone and there'd be nothing created because everyone would just stick with whatever happened before. So that's not necessarily, obviously tradition can't fully win, but where's the balance? And my answer to these, of course, is yes. Yes, this is what schooling is supposed to be. This is what you're supposed to be doing. Anything that represses thinking through things and trying to understand things is not good. What about AP calculus, biochemistry, physics? This is the core of what like to be a great high school student is supposed to be. So certainly valuable to future scientists. There's no debate on that. You can't be a complex thinker about an issue that you flat out don't understand. I mean, there are some things that we understand well enough being in society without having, necessarily studied the thing particularly. I don't think quantum physics is one of them. If you don't know the details of it well enough, you cannot add something. You cannot be creative in it. There's reason for people to study this. But as the standard of high school achievement, I don't have to ever have talked to another human being, but I do need to excel at chemical equations that fewer than 1% of people are ever going to use. That's a strange message we're sending to students, and what you get when you put those incentives in place is exactly what you think. People follow incentives. They become really good at chemistry and they don't learn how to talk to people. So am I against these things? I am against them as the metric of success that everyone needs to be going for. And I'm against them as being something that's at all considered required. And I don't even just mean the APs. Your actual knowledge of chemistry does not have to be that high to function really well in the world. Your ability to deal with other people and think through complex questions, that does. So is technology, I mean, if we don't have to learn APs anymore, is technology taking away from it what makes us even special? I don't think so. I think what's special is that we as a human population discovered these chemical things and we can actually reproduce them. That's amazing. Technology didn't do that for us. And now we've created technology that actually can display that can use these things. That's all amazing. That's what makes us special. Our creativity, our problem solving, our ability to convince other people that what we had is good. Again, just because we used it, going back to Steve Jobs, he wasn't just an innovator. He was a great salesman. He could convince people that what he came up with was something that you should actually care about. If you can only innovate, but you don't have that side, you may have your wonderful innovation kept purely to yourself. So no, I don't think so. In fact, I think it's the opposite. I think it might be counterintuitive, but technology actually makes humans better at what we're doing, with providing what? Rapid access to facts and data, right? We don't need to be saying, well, I wonder what that is. Well, maybe I'll send a letter to somebody to try to find out about that. We don't need to do that. It's all available for us. We have expert opinions. Doesn't mean they're right, but it's a pretty good starting place often. And then we also have tools to simplify our lives. Things like Expedia, Google Translate. These are useful things. It's like, in terms of innovation, what if the Wright brothers actually had the internet? What if they had Google Translate? I mean, these guys, it's amazing if you ever read a biography of them, they're some of the greatest tenacious people, just tenacious critical thinkers that I think have ever lived. But the sort of thing they did, they say, okay, well, I think we need to have this testing ground. So where does that weather exist that we can try that out? That was a real question for them. Where can we do this? So they're corresponding by mail with the National Weather Service to try to find out the weather in different places. I mean, they would just look that up in 2 seconds now. Everything they did would be sped up. They would find out exactly where all flight thoughts are, how far everything's come. They'd communicate with the people in France who are are at their level. They'd be able to partner with people. There's so many options. And when it actually came time, they then had this incredibly difficult job of how do we physically move our goods to where it needs to be? They would just say like, okay, what do we need? And then they order it on Amazon. I mean, the whole world would be so much easier to innovate. The world is easier to innovate today. And then you think of the world we're in right now. Well, what would COVID have been if we didn't have technology? If scientists around the world couldn't talk to each other? If people couldn't find out what is happening in other countries, what would the vaccine situation be? I mean, it would be so much harder. We would not be vaccinated. We'd be dying. We wouldn't even know why. We wouldn't necessarily have the statistics to know who's more at risk, who's less at risk, because we wouldn't have that kind of information and information compiling ability. So the ability to innovate, to do things like create vaccines, technology has made us better innovators, not worse. It's taken away the parts that we were never very good at in the first place. So it can also help us with our education. And look, how technology can help us actually be better educators is a whole long, you could write books about this. So I'm just putting a little piece of this at the end so we can open this for questions. But what can it do? Individualization. DLPs are digital learning platforms. I mean, if you've ever used something, and I don't know if you like any of these, but there's like Alex, there's IXL, Khan Academy to some extent. Show of hands, how many of you have used some version of this? Yeah, so that what you've done is called a digital learning platform, if you didn't know. And basically, the way I think of it is it's the latest evolution in books and like a textbook. It has an expert who created it, an expert who says this is the sequence you should learn something. This is how we learn. And then what it did, unlike the textbook, is it turns you to the right page. And it's actually all the textbooks merge. It says, okay, where exactly is your math level right now on all these different metrics? Okay, so what do we need to work on next? It takes you to that place. It gives you immediate feedback as to how you're doing. So we could, I guarantee this is true. If every one of us in this room did an evaluation of our mathematics, some of us may be at the same level, but we still would have areas that I have a hole in versus areas you have holes in. We all are not, even two people who are generally here, it doesn't mean you're here across the board. We all have different things to work on. The idea of having a classroom where we're all doing the same worksheet is pretty ridiculous. Why aren't we all on a digital learning platform for that part of it? Doesn't mean the teacher has no role, but why aren't we all on a digital learning platform where we're working on the part that we personally have as our next step and we're struggling with? I think if this was out there, one of the major problems in education, which is kids in sixth grade who don't have fundamentals. So they can't do the sixth grade math. So they hate it. So they start acting out because everyone in the world would prefer act like they don't care than act like they're dumb and have people think they're dumb. Well, instead, the kid in sixth grade will work on second grade math if that's the level that he can do right now until he can get to where he needs to get to. That can happen with individualized digital learning platforms. Again, it doesn't mean that you fire every teacher and you just have this, but they have a huge role. And the worksheet should be a thing of the past. Also, reduce need for local expertise. I mean, if you just think, I thought COVID really showed this so well when you guys are all on Zoom. I don't know if it ever occurred to you. So you're watching a Zoom lecture. And did you ever think like, why do I need to be watching the Westminster professor? Not to put anything down from the Westminster professor, but why is it the Westminster professor? I mean, why isn't it the Wash U professor? Or why isn't it the Kansas City Community College professor? Like, why? That's a little, why that person? Why don't I just watch whoever explains this the best in the entire world? And then everyone will see that. And of course, people do that, right? You look up, YouTube, sometimes a video by a great professor. People do that. So what technology can do also is help us with that. It can help make it so that you're not limited by the person in front of you. Your ability to access brilliant minds are global. And there are countries that have done versions of this. I have not seen it in person, but I've seen articles about Korea where they invest so much in after-school education for students. And one of the things that's come out of it is these kind of celebrity teachers. They don't teach normal students. You subscribe. And these people can have hundreds of thousands of people who are paying subscribers and all they do is work on, I'm going to be the absolute best at explaining this particular lesson. That's all they do. And they're entertaining, they're engaging, they're thoughtful, they help. And that's a pretty smart model that technology makes possible. So there are lots of ways technology can help us. Also, and this is really a key point of mine, this is where it all comes together. If your faculty doesn't have to do the mundane tasks, and I do include printing worksheets as a mundane task, right? If they don't have to be grading worksheets, what can your faculty be doing? They can be talking to you and engaging you in the complex issues that really take thinking through in your lives and theoretically in your lives. women's suffrage. To have it happen, it partnered with people who they didn't want to partner with. Was it worth it? Was it a pragmatic, valuable decision, or should they have held on for longer? These are really fascinating things to study and think through and look at that faculty could be doing if they weren't worrying about giving you feedback on your grammar in that particular essay you wrote, when actually, for the most part, the grammar part can all be done by technology better now anyway, and pretty soon it won't even be close, my guess. So what they can do is the things we're talking about. They can deal with you socially. They can help you with that. They can help you come out of your shell. They can help you empathize with other people. So to summarize, the opportunity is there with technology. We just need to make sure we're doing our part really well. And technology's ascension actually helps our part. It helps us do our part. But not if we make our education system based on duplicating the stuff technology does, which we just do worse. And if we do it worse today, we're certainly going to do it worse in the future. So with that, why don't we open it for questions?
I am. So if any of you have questions, raise your hand and get prepared. Think about that question. I'm excited just thinking about some of what you're saying is here we are, a one-to-one campus, and I try to teach my students how to balance. One of my students actually texted me, who's watching you virtually, and said, how do you inspire your teachers to teach in a way that balances technology and that social development or the development of oral communication? How do you do that in your school?
So first thing I should say is 5 months ago, I stepped down from any role in my Somaliland organizations, other than just as a board member of the foundation. So I do not speak on behalf of it. It's very important in leadership changes not to have any confusion about that. So I do not come, you're never not the founder of something you founded, but I don't come to you as somebody who's actively managing it. I should say that. And that's very important. We have good people, and we've had good people for years. So the question is really about how do you inspire your teachers to, how do you inspire your teachers to balance, to bring technology in and to do what you're saying.
Right.
Yes.
Just to develop a balance between that development of oral communication, social development, and technology use.
See, I think that faculty who are the type of faculty we generally get, which is who you would be if you decided you were going to go into education. And when I say you'd be it for a couple of years until you converted to what the existing system is, because you just become part of it. I think new teachers, and many of our people are new teachers, naturally, this is what they want to do. Naturally, they want to be your coach. They don't want to just be lecturing to you. Naturally, they want to actually connect with you. Most people, I think, go into education, into teaching, because they want to connect with people. It would be very strange to go in for a different reason. So I think this is what they want to do. I think they don't know how. I think a very good model, and we started doing this in the country, is so we started rolling out schools that are eventually going to be K through 12 schools. And we're using the Montessori method. And the reason we like Montessori in particular is because actually the teaching part is greatly taken off of the teacher. No one asked them to come up with a curriculum in Montessori. She already did it for the most part, right? So what that means for a teacher is, what am I doing? I'm helping you learn to engage with your classmates. I'm helping you learn the social side. I'm helping you don't get too frustrated with a problem and try to work through it. That's what I think people naturally go into teaching to do. So I can't say we've done it fully effectively yet. It is what I hope to do in the future. What I hope we can do is set this up to let people do what I think they're naturally, someone going into teaching is good at anyway, which is all of these other aspects of it. But it's not going to happen when we're requiring them to come up with the lesson plan for exactly how do you teach this subject. It isn't going to happen that way.
Okay, so who has a question? If you have a question, come on up, be brave. I know I've got a lot of future teachers in here. So if you all have a question, come on up right here. I'm going to go ahead and ask you another question that somebody has asked online. Based on what you've learned in your career now, where you are right now, what major would you choose today?
Oh, okay, good. I've often with students who struggle with this, right? So there's so many students I've advised over the years, and I often tell them, your choice of a major is one of the most overrated decisions that any person makes.
Oh, listen.
It just, now, if you're deciding between becoming an engineer or not, that we're talking about a different situation there, but you're not committed. First of all, you're not going to learn so much about any subject that you're now, the world's expert. And at the same time, nor are you going to learn so much that somebody else can't catch up after who wants to. I think there are very, very few things. If you specifically said, I only want to work on Wall Street, I only want to do that, you probably better study economics or finance, or they're not going to look at you because there's so many people to choose from. But they're just, for the most part, I just don't think it makes that big of a difference. So I'm happy with the economics background. I would have been happy with some other ones also. I don't think it was, I mostly chose something I found engaging at the time.
That's interesting. So I'm sitting here wondering if knowing where you are now, it wouldn't have changed where you started then.
Well, so in my case, I did end up going into finance. It would have perhaps been, more difficult because of the route I was trying to take. And the people I was trying to do it with, it would have been more difficult. Frankly, even going to Emory and not going to an Ivy League college made it so it was going to be more difficult for me. That's just the reality and semi-snobbery of that industry. That's just kind of reality. I just don't think most of the society is that way. I don't think most professions are so limited. And increasingly, I think it's even less and less true. And going into the future, this is my prediction, and it's not based on nothing, is the Elon Musks of the world have pretty much said, I don't care even who your degree is from. I don't necessarily even care that you have a degree. I want to see what you can do, which again speaks to the idea of getting people engaged in the ability to do things, the ability to actually think, problem solve. So I just see the future is going to really be, if you can train yourself to, if you decide you want to be an engineer or a robotics person, there's enough out there to train yourself to be a robotics person. You could major in sociology and end up doing that if you want. I don't think it's that important a decision for most cases.
Right. I'm thinking education, they have to have that certification, but we're seeing that influx of a lot of people coming at education later and trying to get that alternative certification to come into the classroom, which is its own interesting major. And
sorry, and private schools don't care.
Right.
Private schools don't even care if you have the education degree.
Right.
And there are states where it's getting loosened because it's just too hard to find enough quality teachers out there. So they're saying, well, as long as you tried to get a licensed teacher first, we can kind of tolerate this. So I think it's shifting.
I wish our state would shift there. Any questions? I know you all have questions. We have about 10 minutes. Okay, good. Come on up.
So I just had a question. You mentioned a little bit about, like, say, if a student's in 6th grade but not grasping the material, they just need to go back to where they were. Do you think technology can help a little bit with reducing this kind of standardized linear education system we've met, where we kind of just have kids in 2nd grade, keep pushing them and say, well, you should understand this now and you should learn this last year, even if they actually didn't fully grasp it?
Yeah. Yes. So when you say linear, let's be clear. So there is a linear way to do something that is usually true within that thing itself. Anybody who wants to teach you ratios before you learn even what division is or subtraction is really, it's an uphill battle, right? It does make sense to lay the foundation and build on a foundation with a lot of things. I've seen this. I've seen students who are supposed to read a book that is just too high a level for them. And I mean, if you don't understand 3 words in every paragraph, even 3 words, never mind 10 words in a paragraph, you're just going to hate it, right? You can't look up 3 words every time and try to understand what that means. You're never going to get into the story. You're never going to engage with the thing. So there is a reason to have a 1st grade reading book before you'd have a 2nd grade reading book. So linear in that way, which I would call sequence, makes complete sense. What doesn't make sense to me is saying this is exactly what you need to have done in 1st grade. And whether you did it or not, you're going to the 2nd grade one. There can be a kid who actually is super engaged right now in reading and really wants to disproportionately spend the time doing that and can gain several years of reading. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing while their math maybe and other aspects lag behind a bit. And in time, well, hopefully you nudge them in that direction. And hopefully they kind of get that interest, but you still need to be linear in terms of where their math picks up, right? So, and I do think technology can do that because you can track people across all different areas and give them something that's level appropriate no matter what they're doing. If I was to be learning chemistry at this point, which I barely paid any attention to in high school, I would pretty much have to start from the beginning. But that's fine, as long as I had a program that tested, it gave me a little bit of a diagnostic and said, your chemistry is awful. You need to start from the beginning. That's fine. So I think we can let people kind of run with what they want, as long as we're technologically tracking to make sure that we don't then ask them to do something that they're completely unprepared to do, because that's when you get frustration, behavioral issues, all the things that you should get when you're asking someone to do the impossible. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think my question.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, you definitely answered it. It was kind of like all these kids may be in third grade, so let's just say 8-year-olds, but are not at all in the same educational labeling. So I do understand the linear thing and or sequential. You do have to keep building on that. But I think with something like child left behind, things like that, it's like, well, you're 8 years old, you should know this. It's not looking at the individual.
Right. I think, yeah, I think we have to, we're all individuals and we have to be treating everybody like individuals. There are things that we can say. When you've completed the education system, you absolutely should have reached these minimums and different things. I don't have an issue with that. And I should be really clear. Some people use some of the arguments similar to what I'm, at least loosely related to what I'm saying, to try to basically say, oh, there's no such thing as a better performer or worse performer. Some people are doing this for the purpose of not being measured. It is not acceptable for your students to come out without communication skills, without comprehension skills, without math skills, and you just say, well, I'm just kind of meeting them where that's not okay. These things matter, and I think they should be tracked in very much a mastery fashion, and we should judge you by how you've done as a teacher in having your students advance in mastery. What we shouldn't do is say, you're a 5th grade teacher, how did your kids do on a 5th grade test this year? If they all came in at 2nd grade level, how were you supposed to fix that? And I'm even giving you the wrong incentive. What you should be doing is being tested in how did they advance a grade level during that year? Not did they get to this level that you've said, where I also, let's say there's 3 kids in my class who actually are at a much higher level. Well, I can just ignore them because I'm going to pass they're going to pass regardless. I'll just not pay any attention to them. That's not good either. So that's what I'm against. And I'm against people who are using this stuff to try to lower standards. I don't want to lower standards. My standard is that every kid should be advancing a lot every year. But I do believe that will happen once we're meeting them at their level and actually engaging them in things that are relevant to their future, and not just having them feel like I'm doing something that I could look it up online. If I can look it up online, why is it exactly that I need to memorize exactly what that is? I didn't want to do that in school. I mean, this is going to be controversial. There may be a time with the way Google Translate and all this stuff's going where the purpose of learning a foreign language becomes really minimal. I mean, we may already be there, and a lot of them, not everything. You should see how Somali translates to English. It's not good. But for most things, it could, we may be there. You can really have a dialogue with somebody. And if that was the main purpose of learning a language, I think that may have been solved without us learning a language.
All right, educators, that should kind of stimulate some conversation there. You have a question? All right, so one last question.
Hi, so you talked about the different levels of kids and stuff like that. You can be in the same grade, but different levels. So should our grades be not letters and instead be oral examinations? Does that make sense?
So you're saying, should grades not be letter grades, but instead be oral examinations? Is that
yes. So this professor, your job is not just to teach me to move forward, but you're examining my level of education and how much I've grown in this year or that year, instead of saying, take these tests and that's how we examine you.
Yeah, so I would do away with traditional grade system. That's one thing. And I would use a mastery grading system. But to be clear, again, there are people who want to do away with a grading system because they don't want to be judged. And that is because they know they're not performing. and they know their kids aren't performing in the classroom. I am absolutely against that. What I want would be to say, take the K through 6 math standards that are probably pretty good, that they are pretty good, break them into all the pieces, all the components. And with each one, with each kid, what have you mastered? What are you just kind of beginning on? What are you progressing on? And it should be verifiable by a third party. Someone else should be able to come in, sit with that kid and say, and I could sample your classroom and be able to say, I sat with these 5 kids. You have them right on. Your masters are good. So I've audited you essentially. I know it's good. I'm going to believe all your grades are good. Your grade, all your masters good. But that would allow people, that would allow teachers to not do things where you're saying, okay, well, you got a B minus, but so obviously you don't fully know it, but we move on. No, you're going to move on when you master that skill. You don't build on a bad foundation. You build, hopefully, once that foundation is proper and good. And we should go back and fix the things that are broken in cases where they're broken. So, does that answer? No.
Sort of.
Okay. So,
Somewhat.
yeah.
So overall, just we change. Should we, as a future society, start taking that into consideration and changing the grading system?
Yeah, look, there is a move to mastery grading. I didn't come up with this concept. There absolutely is. And I would say Maria Montessori essentially came up with it 100 years ago because she said, what skills can you do? I mean, if you send a kid, I checked it, when she was 4, my daughter went to a Montessori school, and you'd go with them and they have things that they're checking off. They're not mathematical. They're things like, can she hold that thing in the right way? And they just have a whole set of things that they've said, you'd want to do these skills before you do these skills. And they can judge mastery of it. That to me makes a ton of sense. I've talked to people involved in the mastery movement, and essentially what's going on from everything I can tell is all these people want to do it, but they're all terrified of being the ones to do it. They don't want to have this private schools. They don't want to have a bunch of their parents screaming at them and saying, you cost my kid getting into the school they're supposed to. So no one wants to move. So there are very few people who do it, despite it being a widely agreed upon better way to judge. Let me give you one other real quick example of where, like I said, how many of you didn't take a course because it was going to probably lower your GPA? Yeah. That's messed up. That's really a problem. And it's not your fault. It's the fault of the system. The system should not be giving you that incentive, right? I know a former student of ours who was really frustrated in this class. It was a Swahili class. And she said, 3/4 of the kids in the Swahili class are native Swahili speakers. You say, well, why would they be in that? They're in it because they want the GPA boost, right? That's a very strange system. What should happen is when they arrive on campus and they're able to speak Swahili, they should immediately get mastery of Swahili. And then they have no incentive to do that. And if you try to climb Mount Everest and you get 3/4 of the way, good for you. It shouldn't bring down what we view your ability to do other things, right? If you do something hard and you don't pass at it, you didn't pass at it. That's the beauty, again, to mastery grading. You try something that's hard, you didn't get it, you're in no worse shape than if you didn't try it. It actually gives the right incentives. Students are going to follow incentives. Teachers are going to follow incentives. And our system is not giving the right incentives.
And so I can add there that the country is going to standards reference grading, which is completely going away from that whole idea. So education majors, why don't you set out and change that? That would be a great idea. Everybody give a great round of applause to Jonathan.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. And I hope you'll head on to another great session. And we enjoyed having you this